Mom called my baby ugly at her birthday party, so I cut ties and erased her from every photo. Now she's crying on Facebook, playing the victim. My daughter Sarah's first birthday was meant to be soft and forgettable in all the best ways, like a warm breeze in June or the fragrance of cake that lingers on your fingers long after the last mouthful has been eaten. It was a small gathering of family and neighbors in the backyard, with mismatched folding chairs pushed into the lawn, paper plates crumbling under store-bought cupcakes, and kids shrieking aimlessly. The kind of day you wouldn't write a sonnet about, but you would post a few grainy photos online with a message like, "Can't believe she's won already," and then move on. I had no intention of remembering it permanently, at least not in the sense that I do now. Sarah was dressed in a pale yellow romper with a stitched bumblebee on the breast, and one shoe went missing. Within the first 20 minutes, my husband Rick stood beside me, awkwardly holding her as we sang Happy Birthday. Too slowly, too loudly, my sister Donna cracked a joke about our tone-deaf family, and everyone laughed a little too loudly. Since that's what we do, we overcompensated. The air smelt of plastic forks, citronella candles, and charred hamburgers. It should have been a great day. Then my mother arrived late as usual, with a gift too enormous for the occasion, wrapped in shiny gold paper, as if we were celebrating a royal coronation, rather than a baby smearing icing into her own eye socket. Eleanor never knew how to read a room. All she knew was how to walk in and adjust the temperature. She kissed Sarah's head without looking at her, then turned to face me, smiling with her lips but not her eyes. "You look tired," she murmured, just loud enough for Donna to notice. "Still carrying that baby weight, huh?" I laughed quickly and instinctively because I'd spent my entire life trying not to react. When she cut, Rick tried to divert her attention by asking if she wanted a burger or something to drink, but she waved him away like a fly. She seemed overly focused on surveying the party as if she were inspecting a battlefield. The incident occurred as we were attempting to convince Sarah to blow out her single candle. Everyone was crowded around the small table, phones out and voices mingling with fiend eagerness. I leaned in close, smiling, and braced Sarah's small fingers as she reached for the flame. Then my mother leaned down her lips almost next to my ear and said, "She's going to grow up ugly like you." I did not turn to look at her. I did not even blink. I literally froze there mid-smile, one hand on my daughter's small wrist, the other gripping my phone as if it were about to burst. The candle flickered, Sarah produced a sneeze-like sound, and the flame went out. Everyone applauded. The moment has passed, but I did not. Later that night, after Sarah had fallen asleep and the last of the icing had been scraped from the terrace, I sat on the couch browsing through images as if looking for something specific. I didn't know what, not at first. Then I found it. It was fuzzy and overexposed. My face was slightly tilted, my mouth in that strange half-smile you get when you're going to laugh, but something feels off. My mother was in the corner of the shot, just visible behind my shoulder. Her face was near to mine, lips curved like a hook and eyes focused. She resembled a different woman. Nobody else in the shot seems to notice her. They were all concentrating on Sarah, but I saw it. I saw her. I sat there staring at the photo for too long. Rick entered from the kitchen, drying his hands with a towel. Looking through the shots, he inquired, "Yeah." I answered without moving. "That one's cute," he added, referring to a photo of Sarah with frosting on her hair. But I did not show him the second one. I did not say anything. I merely quietly saved it in a folder labeled Evidence All Uppercase. The issue about mothers like mine is that they make you wonder whether your memories are your own or hers. She had a way of twisting things, so I wasn't sure if I was overreacting or simply underhealing. But this time, I had proof. I had a snapshot of the exact moment. My brain said enough. That was the first picture I removed her from. I opened my editing app, the same one youngsters use to smooth their skin and whiten their teeth, and I started tiny. I cropped her out. I removed her shadow. Then I went on to group photography, specifically backyard images. the one where she is seated near the grill, the one where she's holding Sarah but not truly holding her arms stiff, as if the infant was made of knives. Delete crop, overcoat with paint. She'd reply, sometimes in passing, sometimes in the middle of a conversation, as if she was doing me a favor by saying it out loud before anybody else. Could I recall brushing my hair the night before prom, holding the curling iron too long on one strand till it sizzled, and hearing her through the cracked door exclaim, "She's just forgettable. Maybe it's the eyes." As if I weren't right there, as if I weren't attempting to obliterate myself quicker than she could. At 22, I told her I wanted to relocate across the nation, start anew, and possibly go to graduate school. She did not flinch. She simply muttered, "You were probably a mistake anyway," as if she were reading it from a grocery list. I did not cry, I just nodded. Because what else can you do when someone tells you the truth like that? You either let it soak into your bones or spit it out before it sticks. I let it settle for years. But now I have Sarah, and something about becoming a mother makes you want to either shield your child from the world or expose her to it. Piece by agonizing piece. I picked protection since I was aware of how sharp the initial cut could be, and I'd rather she was naive than quietly bleeding before she learned to speak. So I dug deeper than photos. I dug up the old flash drives, cloud backups, and printed albums buried in drawers I hadn't touched in years. Lelenar, my mother was posing next to me at my wedding with a tight-lipped smirk, as if she were watching a slow-motion calamity. I opened the image in an editor and meticulously painted her out. It took 10 minutes. 10 minutes to remove decades of her standing too near to me, clutching me as if she were allergic to warmth. Gone, I glanced at the shot. Thereafter, the space she had occupied now filled with light and air. It seemed better without her. Then I moved on to the Christmas of 3 years ago. She informed me that if I didn't cut back on the salt, Sarah would most likely be born cross-eyed. She said it with a giggle fork halfway in her mouth. I nodded, too tired to fight. She was no longer in the background of the photograph, replaced by the glow of the tree and Donna's toddler throwing a plastic ornament at the cat. I erased her from a total of 24 images, which is unusual given that we only had 13 visitors at the party. But she managed to insert herself into every situation, as if she was certain that no moment went by without her involvement. Donna was the first to notice. She texted me 2 days after I published the revised album online. "Where's Mom in these pics? Did she leave early?" I composed and deleted my response 3 times before I got to. She must have stepped out when those were taken. Technically, this is not a lie. Spiritually, perhaps. Rick took notice next. He didn't say anything right immediately, but gave me the slow, deliberate look he saves for when he's deciding whether to hug me or propose therapy. Finally, during supper, he asked, "Are you sure this is the road you want to go down?" I gazed at Sarah, cheeks full of mashed peas, face plastered with love and innocence, and said, "I'm already halfway there." What I did not mention was this. If I had a time machine, I would not go back and stop myself from doing this. I go back even further and eliminate Eleanor from every birthday, every dance recital, and every time I stood in front of a mirror and despised what I saw, because she had given me the means to express that hatred. Late that night, I was going through my phone in the dark when I noticed the message notification flash up one line. "No greetings. Why am I blocked from your daughter's baby album?" I stared at it for so long that the screen darkened. I did not respond. I did not need to. She understood why she simply didn't want to say it. And, to be honest, part of me was waiting to see whether she'd send another message, call, or even show up again, as if nothing had happened. Pretending that I was the dramatic one, like I'd always misunderstood her. Like her comments were never daggers, but rather innocent small remarks. But she did not follow up. She did not push because she must have known deep down in her cruel little chest that I wasn't flinching this time. This time I was chopping, and this time she was not returning. There is a type of vengeance that does not include broken glass or shouted voices, and does not result in bruises, shredded garments, or tire marks in a driveway. It comes on slowly like poison in a cup of tea, something that tastes nearly good before making you sick, And when done correctly, no one can track it back to you. That's how I began dealing with my mother, as if she were a silent infection that I was finally addressing after years of pretending I wasn't sick. Yes, it started with the photographs, but it did not end there. Removing her face from images was simply the beginning. Underneath that surface, the rot permeated everything she touched, and I wasn't finished pulling it out yet. First, I excluded her from the family calendar, which Rick and I used to keep track of. Birthdays, appointments, preschool visits, medical checkups, and holidays. I removed her email address from the invitation list. She deleted all of the events she had previously been invited to. She wiped away the repeated reminders of her presence. Then I altered the location of Sarah's daycare picnic and only shared the new information to people I trusted not to share it. When Donna inquired as to why the address had changed, I explained that they were experiencing plumbing troubles. That was enough to please her. Nobody doubts logistics. When it comes to infants, everyone assumes that the mess belongs to someone else. Rick was watching me out of the corner of his eye, much like a man watches a lady who has started carrying a knife. I'm not sure whether she's defending herself or preparing something worse. One night, while Sarah was sleeping and I was lying on the couch retouching another old shot, he asked me, "Are you going to tell her?" I did not look up from my screen. Tell who what? He gave me the worn look I'd come to expect, the one that screamed, "Don't act dumb, Jenna, not with me." So I closed my laptop and looked into his eyes. "Are you going to tell your mother why you're cutting her out of everything?" I did not respond right away because there was too much to say and none of it came across the way I needed it to, so I simply shook my head. She doesn't deserve closure. I finally stated she never gave me any, and that was the most honest sentence I had spoken aloud in months. I didn't receive any closure. When she told me I was prettier before my teeth came in, I was 10 years old standing in our hallway in a new pink dress, beaming because I finally had sleeves that weren't stretched out hand-me-downs. She glanced at me and said, "You used to be cute before those teeth." She treated me as if I were some wrecked adult she no longer wanted. I didn't find closure when she mocked me for crying at my own graduation, or told me that no man would ever marry someone so emotional. And I didn't receive any closure when she claimed Sarah would grow up to be ugly like me. So, she wasn't receiving courteous phone calls. She wasn't receiving a formal announcement. She would figure it out in the same way the rest of the world does, via absence. Absence, however, carries its own weight. It fills the room like smoke, slow and undetectable at first, then stifling when you realize you've been waiting too long to move. She must have felt it too, because less than a week after I kicked her out of the picnic, she showed up on my doorstep. It was late Thursday afternoon. The light was softening and the fragrance of sun-warmed mulch rose from the flower beds I hadn't touched since spring. Sarah was playing with a bucket of toy blocks on the floor, humming to herself in that delightful nonsense language that toddlers use before words make sense. Then the doorbell rang. I recognized who it was before I opened it. Eleanor stood there clutching a gift bag that appeared to have come from an extravagant downtown boutique, complete with glittering handles and ribbons. Instead of wrapping paper, she wore her frozen half-smile, which she employed when she wanted to appear warm, but didn't have the energy for. And I will say this for her. She did not begin with a question, an apology, or even a joke. She simply said, "Thought I'd drop by for Lily." I remained in the doorway and did not move aside. I wasn't going to make it simple inside. Sarah stopped humming. She looked up then toward the door, then back down, as if something in her little head wasn't quite right. Eventually, I let Eleanor in. More out of morbid curiosity than grace, she tried to approach Sarah carefully, crouched next to her and holding out the bag like a wicked fairy godmother dispensing curses disguised as candy. But Sarah didn't approach her. She did not even smile. She glanced at Eleanor for a few long seconds before returning to her blocks and picking up the green one, as if the moment had passed. I saw my mother's face flicker in perplexity, the corners of her lips sagging just slightly. Not enough for most people to notice, but I recognized every crease in her face, every breach in her armor. She waited for Sarah to get closer, for that innate infantile need to reach out to a familiar adult, but it never arrived. In that instant, something sharp and decisive clicked into place, because even babies recognize when love is not genuine. I took the gift bag from her hands without saying anything, placed it on the table without peeking inside, and said the only thing that needed to be spoken. "I think it's time you left." She did not argue. She did not yell. She only nodded once and turned around her heels, clicking against the hardwood as she walked out of the house, as if she had somewhere more important to do. However, she didn't. Not anymore, because I wasn't going to burn down the house with her inside. I was only making sure she never got a key again. I always assumed that if anyone was going to support me, really step up and say, "Yeah, she did that. I saw it too. She said those things." It would be my sister. Donna was the one who experienced it beside me. Grew up in the same tight house with the same oppressive restrictions and chilly silences that lasted longer than they should have. She was present when our mother called me dramatic for crying during Dad's burial, and then brought her into the kitchen to whisper, "Thank God it wasn't you, sweetheart. I couldn't handle that." She was there when Eleanor would criticize my appearance before turning to Donna with a smile so warm you'd swear it came from someone else's mouth. We used to laugh about it in our 20s, laying on the floor of my flat with cheap wine and takeaway, calling her Jackal and Mom when we were courageous enough to do so. But we never dug deeper. We never asked why Donna received the gold while I got the gravel. So when she eventually texted, "Can we talk?" I knew what was coming. The guilt, the perplexity. Perhaps you're taking things a little too far? Even though I had prepared for it, I still felt a knot in my gut. The same one I used to get when I was a kid, and Eleanor called my name from another room, with that tone that made you question if you'd done anything wrong, even though you hadn't. Donna arrived with coffee in her hand, and a tense expression on her face as if she was trying not to frown but couldn't quite achieve it. She didn't sit down straight away, instead hovering around the kitchen counter as if she wasn't sure she wanted to remain long. I waited for her to speak first, since I understood how things worked. She needed to feel in charge of the story. You've been editing her out of everything. She finally said her words, cautious and slow, as if she hoped if she softened them enough, I wouldn't realize they were loaded with judgment. I nodded and leaned against the wall. "Yeah, I have." She hesitated and added, "Isn't that a bit much?" That was when I decided to show her the photograph. I kept it printed, despite my promise to myself that I was done with Eleanor. But this one was not for her. It was for proof. I gave it to Donna across the table. It was the identical picture from Sarah's birthday, with everyone else clapping and celebrating, and Eleanor leaning into my ear, her mouth contorted, as if she were spitting out a bitter truth. She said Sarah would grow up ugly. I told Donna directly. Like me, Donna stared down at the photograph and remained silent for a long time. I saw her eyes skim the edges, the faces, and the frozen moment of me in mid-smile, my body stiffening. I waited for a denial. The deflection. You must have misheard her, but it didn't arrive. Not right away. Instead, she spoke almost too quietly. "I thought you looked happy in this one." I shook my head, slowly exhausted. "Do you really think I was?" She didn't respond. That quiet broke something in her. Not totally. Not enough to rebuild trust, but enough to consider the possibility that I wasn't making it up. That maybe all those years I was accused of being the sensitive one, the delicate one, the one with too much emotion and too little humor. Maybe I was simply the one telling the truth too soon for anyone to believe it. Then the bomb dropped. That night, Eleanor made a Facebook post. This is not a private message. This is not a telephone call. A public status that all her friends, neighbors, elderly churchwomen, past co-workers, and barely active high school acquaintances could see. It reads, "My daughter has poisoned my relationship with my granddaughter. Pray for me during this painful time." Some people don't know what family means until it's too late. It was shared 17 times. Inside the first hour, people began to leave comments, sending her hugs and prayers, as well as anecdotes about their own children growing cold or entitled and rude. Some of them even mentioned forgiveness. A woman wrote, You're still her mother. Don't give up on her yet. I read it all in startled silence. Sitting in my kitchen with the lights turned out and the light from my phone searing into my eyes, my hands shook with a mixture of wrath, embarrassment, and something I couldn't quite name. Perhaps grief for the tiny part of me that still wished she'd someday say, I was wrong, you didn't deserve that. But she never would. Instead, she went nuclear. I considered leaving the post unanswered, allowing her to sink in her own martyrdom as I remained silent. But then I realized that quiet was what had kept me shackled for so damn long. She felt most comfortable speaking in silence, saying nothing in response to nasty comments. When memory was uncomfortable, we pretended it did not exist, expecting me to take every insult like communion. So I broke the silence with a single comment, only one. You should pray for the woman in that photo I commented on her page. She doesn't exist anymore. By morning, there had been over 200 comments. Some of them supported her, some of them backed me, but the ones that struck the deepest were asking what really happened. For once, she did not have control over the tale. Something shifted in that place of uncertainty, in the vacuum of well-built lies, because folks may not have needed to know everything. Perhaps it was enough that she was no longer the only one speaking. Following the final confrontation, there is an unusual silence. When the ranting stops, the social media dust settles, and the door you close behind, someone no longer rattles. Not because they stopped pushing, but because they eventually gave up. That was the solitude I awoke to on Thursday morning, a cup of coffee in one hand. Sarah crawled over the living room, carpeting in her footy pajamas, her mouth eating something invisible and her little fingers smacking against blocks that no longer lit up like they once did. The world seemed quieter, not quite peaceful, but hollowed down in a way I'd never felt before. It was the kind of silence you get after gutting a house, and the floors still echoed from what once lived there. I'd been thinking about the baby book for months, ever since Eleanor showed up with that present bag, and Sarah shied away as if her body knew better than to let the poison in. Something clicked for me that day, something essential and definitive. It wasn't simply about eliminating my mother from the present, it was about denying her access to the future, ensuring that her shadow never crossed the barrier of Sarah's recollection. Because youngsters remember more than we realize. They recall the tone of voices, the stiffness in their mother's jaw, and how hands clench when the phone rings. I remembered. I recalled everything, and I wasn't about to let Sarah inherit that history of harm. So I started writing it by hand, which felt more traditional and spiritual than typing. I made my own baby book with pastel pages and gendered questions. Brown leather, thick paper-stitched binding. I composed the narrative of Sarah's birth. Her fingers curled around my thumb as if she knew who I was. It was the first time she laughed at the dog's tail. She preferred sweet potatoes over carrots. I wrote about Rick installing her cot in the middle of the night while muttering under his breath, and how we debated whether or not to play white noise while she was sleeping. But I did not write about Eleanor. Not once, not just a footnote, not as a background character, not as a name scribbled beside guests or presents. She was a ghost, and ghosts do not belong in infant books. Each page represented a little insurrection. Each line of ink was a means of saying, you don't get to live here anymore. Rick observed me working on it in silence. He didn't ask any questions, did not make any ideas. One night he came over, took the finished book from my hands, and delicately placed it on the shelf above Sarah's changing table, as if it were holy. And perhaps it was the next morning. Sarah toddled over to that shelf, pointing with one chubby finger. She glanced at me, her eyes wide and eager, and spoke her first proper sentence. Not one word, a sentence, none gone. I did not cry, I did not flinch. I simply smiled, got down to her level, and said, yeah, baby, she is. It was not unkind, it was not even bitter. This was the truth. The simplest kind. The kind that doesn't require a story to back it up. Because Eleanor had not just departed from our lives, I had made sure she couldn't return. Like a whisper, as a twisted memory, as a ghost pretending to be family. I did not kill my mother. I simply removed the thought of her. For a while, that was plenty. The quiet gathered around us like dust on a windowsill. Rick and I began sleeping better. Donna maintained her distance, unsure whether to embrace the silence or confront it. I didn't push her in any manner. Lelinar's absence provided me more breathing room, and I had no desire to fill it with past remorse or half-reconciled relationships. But 6 months later, a letter arrived. There's no return address. There was no postmark that I recognized. The envelope only had my name on it, written in handwriting I hadn't seen in years, not since Mother used to sign my permission slips with a long, irritated scroll. I considered burning it. I even held it over the sink for a bit, attempting to determine whether it was substantial enough to hold more than paper. But I did open it. There was a photograph inside me at 13. No makeup, bad braces, an oversized t-shirt, and stringy hair put into a ponytail. I was smiling. Not a contrived smile, but a genuine, embarrassed, hopeful one. I had the impression that the person behind the camera adored me. On the back, she had scribbled only one line. "You were never ugly. I just didn't know how to love pretty things." No apologies. There's no explanation. Just one sentence. A confession laced with cowardice. The truth is too late to matter and too early to forgive. I stared at the photo for a long time. Not because I miss her, not because I thought she had changed, but I wanted to remember the girl in the photo. I wanted to remember that despite everything, I still thought I was worth capturing, worth seeing. I did not write back. I did not call. I did not post an answer. But I did not throw away the photograph either. I kept it. Not for me to recall what I survived. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.